let's start off by talking about the social issues, which is primarily going to focus on immigration.
Yeah.
Because you know that episode that we did, I think it was actually our last episode. If it wasn't our last episode, it was the episode before that, where we talked about how this idea that the Republican Party is the party of free speech is complete and utter bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I think Trump might have watched that episode.
Yeah.
Because
he was like, you know what? I'm untethered. It was so funny seeing reactions on YouTube to that.
Yeah.
Because everybody was like, no, he is. He's good on free speech. Like, it was so funny, like, watching people defend him while his administration is literally, like, plucking people off the street and punishing them for the content of their speech. Like, literally just, like, and the thing is, like, because it's immigrants or because it's people who are not citizens and, it's people are treating this like it's all bets are off, like it's totally fine, it doesn't matter, they don't have like the same or many of the same rights as the rest of us, and it's just so absurd and so frustrating. The number of stories about activists and stuff that have been specifically targeted clearly because of their activism is stunning.
Yeah. And no case is that more apparent than in the case of Mahmoud Khalil. Like, oh my God, this is quite possibly one of the most egregious miscarriages of justice, obvious arrests on, like, arresting for a thought crime, basically. So Khalil was a pro-Palestinian activist on the Columbia University campus, which, by the way, Columbia University basically capitulated to the Trump administration in terms of policies regarding protests. They should have been standing behind this student and calling the Trump administration a fascist and defending the student. Instead, they just caved to him because, historically, appeasing a fascist goes very well. It works extremely well.
Yeah, especially for higher education and all that. Yeah, it just has gone really well in the past.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Columbia University had hired as its president Neville Chamberlain. So anyways, this guy, he's 30 years old. He is a green card holder, which means he is a permanent legal resident. And by the way, we need to understand that because remember, one of the things that the Trump campaign kept saying, and the first Trump administration kept saying, is, oh, we're not going after the legal immigrants. We're only going after the illegal ones. All right. If you're here legally, we love you. You're great. You're great. This is a green card holder, a permanent legal resident.
Lawful permanent resident. Yeah.
A lawful permanent resident who is married to an American citizen who is pregnant, by the way.
Yep.
His wife is pregnant, by the way. And he was disappeared in the middle of the night. He was picked up by people that weren't in uniform in an unmarked van saying that they were from ICE, while like one of his colleagues basically recorded it, basically saying, I don't know what's going on here. He has been held in detention, and they're trying to deport him to Syria, his home country. And basically, they're admitting that he's not being accused of any crimes.
Yes.
They're saying he's
in the
not
fact
being
that
accused of any crimes.
Has not been charged or accused of any crimes. Yeah, now you can hide that. Yeah.
So what Marco Rubio is basically saying is, he's a threat to foreign interests because he's been spreading anti-Semitism, except he hasn't been doing that. He is actually one of the activists who has even called out anti-Semitism in the pro-Palestinian movement, which, is a problem. Like, it is absolutely a problem that we've acknowledged on this pod, that there are definitely some facets of the pro-Palestinian movement that are anti-Semitic. Not all of them, not most of them. All right? Most of them are perfectly peaceful and not anti-Semitic. In fact, much of the pro-Palestinian movement is actually made up of Jewish people. There are lots of Jewish people in the pro-Palestinian movement who have been against the bombardment of Gaza. But because this guy had the nerve to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be bombing babies overseas. We shouldn't be giving Israel weapons so they can bomb babies. Because he had the nerve to say that, he's a threat to United States foreign interests. And therefore, they arrested him, and they're trying to deport him. And just recently, just today, a immigration judge in Louisiana decreed that he could be deported.
Yeah.
Decreed that he could be deported. And the only evidence that the Trump administration provided was an undated 2-page memo where Rubio basically said, "Oh yeah, I think that he is a threat to U.S. foreign policy. Yeah, that's why we're doing this." It was a 2-page memo. That was the only evidence that they provided, and this judge backed them up. Now, to be clear, he does have until April 23rd in order to request a stay of his deportation, and his attorneys are definitely going to request that. There is definitely going to be an appeal, but my God, what a fucking joke of a judge. This judge's name is Judge Jimmy Commons. What a fucking joke of a judge. All right. This is the clearest violation of the First Amendment we've ever fucking seen. And you're just going to say, "Oh yeah, no, they can definitely do that." And you know the only reason why she's doing that, the only reason why she ruled like that, it's because the Trump administration has been threatening judges recently, has been trying to intimidate judges recently. So she's doing it because she's a fucking coward who doesn't give a shit about upholding the rule of law. All she cares about is her own ass, all right? And in the meantime, she's going to appease a fascist administration to allow somebody to be deported for freedom of speech, for practicing speech, for just saying, "Hey, babies should not be fucking bombed overseas."
Yeah. I find these like a lot of the legal questions in these cases to be both a little bit like weird and counterintuitive and confusing, but also just like seems to be laying bare some of the real holes that we have in protections for like immigrants, migrants, legal like permanent residents and things like that. It's like, to your point, so we have these like immigration courts, right, which are these kind of like quasi-legal entities. I believe they're extensions of the executive branch, and they're basically responsible for adjudicating these immigration questions. So not really necessarily part of even the judicial branch, but like an executive kind of function for making these adjudications, which is super fucking weird. Now, I don't know if this particular court is an immigration judge or a real judge, but I think it's an immigration judge.
Yeah,
but ultimately,
judge.
it's like a weird position for these people to be in, where they have like half in and half out protections from like the legal system. And like in this particular case, Rubio is relying on this law that was implemented in the 1950s called the McCarran-Walter Act, and or the Immigration Nationality Act of 1952. Basically, it gives the Secretary of State this authority to like just decide that non-citizens present in the United States can threaten our country's foreign policy goals, which, like, to your point, Nathan, it seems overly broad, but most importantly, it seems like it has no mechanism to prevent the law from running afoul of other rights, which is why this whole legal situation seems so weird and like disappointing, and also just like it seems like there are some huge gaps in this system, because we basically, like, it is true that non-citizens in the U.S. have rights under our Constitution, rights to due process, like, yes, freedom of speech, like there are rights under our Constitution. And so, and like at the same time, like something like free speech, to your point, that's a very like highly protected right. It's a right that's protected from government interference, not even just like overt government interference, but things that could even have chilling effects on free speech. And what would be a chilling effect on free speech if not potentially removing someone from their place of permanent legal residence? Yeah. And yet there seems to be this weird case where they've got laws that basically say, at the same time as these people have constitutional rights, that these people have essentially no rights at all, that the Secretary of State can make whatever determination he wants. So like, I really don't understand like what kind of legal gray area these poor people are falling into, but it seems like, but it seems like no one really knows, honestly. Like, it seems like judges are kind of making these calls, and they have these huge implications for these individuals. And it's kind of being decided on like these ad hoc case by case basis, which doesn't seem at all like what we would have to do to protect people appropriately.
Yeah. And one thing that you need to understand is it doesn't really matter what old law they use to justify it. Whatever they try to use to justify it, it's unconstitutional. And the Constitution is the supreme law of the land,
Yeah.
which means that if you, I mean, honestly, if you are going to say, oh, this law gives you the authority to do that, well, then that's an unconstitutional law.
That's what it
It
seems
is
like
just,
to me.
it's just an unconstitutional law. And let me
Yeah.
tell you, let me say something that is just really fucking disappointing to me as an American. There's a friend of mine, and I'm not going to give any major details because I want to protect them, but there's a friend of mine who is actually trying to become a citizen of the United States right now and has been trying to for a while, has been going through the legal process. And like during the entire process, I kept bragging to them about how amazing freedom of speech is, because they're from a country that doesn't really have freedom of speech, that is not a country where you can actively criticize the government. And like I was talking to them about how great it's going to be when you come to the United States and you can say whatever the fuck you want about the government.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was telling this person that, and I've been saying that for the last few years. And you know what I did recently? I sent that person, I told that person, do not say anything political. Like,
Yeah.
Like right now, do not say anything political. Do not make any public political statements. Don't post anything political on social media, because we don't have that right. And you are uniquely vulnerable because of that. And the fact that I had to, this thing about America that I had been bragging to this person about, I then had to tell them, don't do that. Like, don't say anything political, because like it might undermine your ability to come here.
Yeah.
That was just so disappointing to me as an American.
Totally. I mean, like literally the administration has said, they put out the Department of Homeland Security put out a memo saying that our immigration services will be scanning the social media accounts of potential green card applicants to scan them for anti-Semitic content. Explicitly.
Or anti-American content, which
basically
they define as anything that's like slightly to the left of center.
And they define anti-Semitic content as anything like any comments about Palestine or Gaza whatsoever. So it is literally a content-based perspective that our government has on allowing people into this country based on the content of their speech. It's pretty stunning. And I don't think that aspect of it is getting like all that much attention. Like people are really focusing on the inhumanity of it, because especially in combination with some of the other stories that are going on in this administration's inhumane treatment of and frankly just like unlawful treatment of migrants. Like I think a lot of the intention has been on that. But like I think so much less, like I don't hear anybody making the point that like these people are claiming to be free speech advocates who are shutting down free speech. Like it's just not, it's not being like amplified in the way that I would expect.
Yeah. Like I said in the free speech episode, the most anti-free speech president that we have ever had.
Yeah.
And it's like,
totally.
It's amazing.
And the president most antagonistic towards the protection of the law in general.
Yeah.
And I think that is really coming across in some of the cases that we're seeing from like a group of hundreds of like primarily Venezuelan migrants that have been recently, like people keep calling it deported. It's not really deported. It's more like kidnapped.
Yeah.
Honestly, they're just being like kidnapped and then sent, and they've been sent to a prison in El Salvador, a mega prison.
Yeah.
And
which, by the way, let's talk about that prison for a second. Because Human Rights Watch actually released a statement, and this was a statement that Juanita Gubertas, I think that's how you pronounce this person's name. I apologize if that is not how you do it. Stated all of this under penalty of perjury. So this isn't just like this is a testimony. This is
Mhm.
not just some rando. This is an official from Human Rights Watch who made these statements under penalty of perjury. This is someone who has studied the prison systems of El Salvador, and specifically the prison that these people are being sent to, which is the Center for Terrorism Confinement in Tecoluca, El Salvador. As it stands, about 200 migrants have been sent to this prison. And one thing that we need to be clear about, they were sent there without due process.
Yep.
Right? We have no way of knowing if any of them were actually gang members. We have no way of knowing if
Yeah.
any of them if any of them were actually dangerous.
Yeah,
We don't know
'cause-
what their actual immigration status was in terms
Yeah.
of like legal, illegal, undocumented, green card holder, whatever. We don't know any of that. We don't know hardly any of that stuff about these people.
In fact, the only due process that was even attempted was a federal judge that ordered the Trump administration to halt the planes that are deporting these people.
Which they ignored.
They totally ignored. Yeah, this judge like gave them this ordered the planes to be turned around, and basically their response was, well, you didn't write it down, which is a not legally relevant factor, and the planes were already over international waters, so no jurisdiction, which is not true. So, like, if anybody's also like concerned about the looming constitutional crisis here, it's already happened. They've already ignored a federal judge's orders. So,
Yeah.
just a little fun little side note. But like that was the attempt at due process, and they failed.
Yeah. And let's talk about the conditions of this place. So that Human Rights Watch report says, quote, well, SECOT, which is the name of the prison, is likely to have more modern technology and infrastructure than other prisons in El Salvador. I understand the mistreatment of detainees there to be in large part similar to what Human Rights Watch has documented in other prisons in El Salvador. This includes cases of torture, ill treatment, incommunicado detention, which I believe is solitary confinement, severe violations of due process, inhumane conditions such as a lack of access to adequate health care and food. In videos obtained by visits to this prison, Salvadorian authorities are seen saying that the prisoners are only allowed to leave the cell for 30 minutes a day. Some are held in solitary confinement in completely dark cells basically the entire time. This is a torture prison.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a fucking torture prison.
A torture prison that our U.S. government has contracted to house migrants, and they've justified it by, without evidence, claiming that there is a invasion by a Venezuelan gang called Tren de Agua, and they're claiming, again without evidence, that all of these 200 plus people were members of this gang. And the evidence that they do provide, and when initially compelled to like produce evidence by the federal judge that they ignored, they basically said, nope, state secrets, we're not telling you anything about this. And eventually some evidence has come out, and it's things like this person has, like certain tattoos. I think that's the most common piece of evidence. So the Texas Department of Public Safety last year identified, right, a bunch of tattoos that they claim were connected to Tren de Aragua. But they're like basic common tattoos, like stars, crowns, firearms, trains, dice, roses, tigers, jaguars. These are just fucking tattoos. And so all of a ton of people with many of whom have lawful status in the United States are being swept up in these raids. Again, to Nathan's point, no due process, no way to confirm that they're actually part of this gang. And in fact, an investigation from CBS found that 3/4 of the people deported had no criminal records at all. So these are not the hardened criminals that Trump is like claiming. They're just 200 plus people that got unlucky. Like one guy, he lives in Maryland, or he lived in Maryland, married to a U.S. citizen, has 3 kids, one of whom is a U.S. citizen, and had specific protections from being deported to El Salvador because an immigration judge had found that he might be targeted if he were to return to El Salvador, right? So he was protected from being removed from the country. And he's never been charged with a crime, never been convicted of any crimes, and by all accounts is just a normal dude, and was just deported and sent to El Salvador. And they were claiming that he was a member of MS-13, and honestly, it's just guilty until proven innocent. That is their approach.
And he was arrested while he was with his kid, who's autistic, by the way. He was just out with his kid. Part of evidence that was provided was he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat, which is supposed to be gang colors, apparently.
Yeah, right. And like, heartlessly, his wife fucking found out about this on the news. He just disappeared, because like that is the shit that they're doing. They're just disappearing people.
Yeah. And then they admitted that it was a mistake.
Yes.
But then they argued in front of the Supreme Court that they had no obligation to fix their mistake.
Yep.
Then the Supreme Court, in a shocking turn of events, did something actually decent and said, no, actually, you do have to get this guy back that you deported by mistake. Like, what the actual fuck?
Yeah.
Start doing that.
Yep.
And they're basically like, well, we're not sure if we're going to be able to. It's like, no, you fucking fix that problem.
Yeah.
Like, you created that problem. Like, just imagine. Just the fact that they were in front of the Supreme Court. Like, if any decent human being, if they made a mistake that resulted in an innocent person being sent to a torture prison, the first thing that you should be doing is, oh my God, we have to fix this. We have to fix this immediately. Instead, they went to the Supreme Court and argued, we don't give a fuck.
Honestly, that was their argument. Their argument was, whoops, we don't give a fuck. And it's not only is it heartless, but it should be totally chilling to every person in the United States. Like, their hostility towards free speech, their blatant disregard for due process. And I think people are not, similar to like the free speech thing, I don't think people are really understanding why this due process thing fucking matters a lot to all of us. Because like I think people hear due process and they think, legal nerd, you're a nerd, I don't care about due process or whatever. Without due process rights, there are no rights.
Yeah.
It's the fundamental one. If you don't have the right to enforce your own rights, then you have them in name only.
Yeah.
Like, if you can be whisked away without any substantial evidence, without a right to a trial of any kind or review of any kind, to an international prison, which the administration has said that they can't necessarily get people back from. Like, the Justice Department literally said to the Supreme Court, quote, "The United States does not have control over the sovereign nation of El Salvador, nor can it compel El Salvador to follow a federal judge's bidding," which is basically saying, yeah, sure, we might have fucked up, but there's nothing we can do about it. If you don't have the right to defend yourself against that kind of treatment, then you have no rights whatsoever. And Sonia Sotomayor wrote in this decision, quote, "The implication of the government's position is that not only non-citizens, but also U.S. citizens could be taken off the street, forced onto planes, and confined to foreign prisons with no opportunity for redress if judicial review is denied unlawfully before removal."
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we should be so terrified, is because without due process, which determines the thresholds that are required to determine if someone has committed a crime or is able to be imprisoned or punished or whatever. Without that, then like without the due process protecting immigrants, there's no way to tell that they're not U.S. citizens.
Yeah. Like that's the thing. The thing you need to understand is that if they can deport undocumented immigrants without due process, that means they can deport citizens without due process, because there has to be a process in figuring out who's documented and who's not.
Yeah.
All right, that is a part of due process. And if they do not determine that, then they could deport U.S. citizens as well.
Yes.
The thing is, when they were asked, when the White House press secretary was asked, how many of these people are actually criminals, she basically was like, oh, well, all of them are criminals because all of them are here illegally. It's like, okay, but you didn't prove that they were here illegally. You didn't prove that. And here's the thing about the American judicial system. It's based on the principle of innocent until proven guilty. So what the correct answer of that is that 200 plus of the people that were sent there were innocent. Because they were never proven guilty.
Exactly.
Because that's how fucking due process works.
Exactly.
And the annoying thing about that is that you've destroyed any chance of due process in the future.
Yes.
If any of them were actually violent criminals, if any of them were actually a part of this gang, you've destroyed any possibility of due process for any type of actual justice in the future. Because the only way that we can go forward from here is to basically bring all of them back and have them go through due process. But every single one of them has a pretty damn good case to have whatever they might have been accused of just completely dismissed on account of the fact that their rights were violated, which means that you've just destroyed any possibility of these people actually going through the criminal justice system in any meaningful way, which is basically exactly what happened in Guantanamo Bay. The reason why there are still people at Guantanamo Bay, still lots of innocent people at Guantanamo Bay, is because the U.S. government basically realized, well, there are some really scary terrorists there, but under our own laws, if we tried to put the actual terrorists through due process, the case would be dismissed because we violated their rights.
Yeah.
That is why this is so important, all right? These people are basically being disappeared in the night. They're having their heads shaven. That's another thing. They shave their fucking heads before they put them on a bus that goes to a plane to take them to a torture prison in El Salvador.
Yep.
And then they have the fucking Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, go out there and do a fucking photo op in front of these people. These are the most evil fucking fascist piece of shits that have ever run this country. All right? And if you are not pissed, you are not paying attention.
Yes. Yes. And one last point. In response to it could be you, it could be a U.S. citizen. So many people will say, oh, that's overhyping it. That's overblown. There's no way. That's not how it's going to work. When asked if there was a potential for sending U.S. citizens to this El Salvadorian prison, Trump said, quote, I love that. Honored to give them, to the country. And when asked about that, press secretary Caroline Leavitt said that, quote, the president said, if it's legal, right, if there's a legal pathway to do that, he's not sure. We are not sure if there is. It's an idea that he has simply floated and has discussed very publicly as in the effort of transparency. He's discussed the idea quite a few times publicly, also discussed it privately. So they're literally considering and discussing it publicly and privately, the potential to knowingly deport U.S. citizens to an international prison, which is illegal, but there's no reason to think they would respect that. So not only is there the chance that U.S. citizens would be swept up in this because there's no mechanism to protect them from it, but there's an intention to take U.S. citizens and deport them. And combined with this administration's open hostility towards dissent, which is initially demonstrated against immigrants because they have fewer protections, should be entirely chilling. I'll be honest. I have thought many times over the last month or two if we should even do the pod. I've literally considered the possibility that it might just be too risky for us to criticize the administration. And if that's not a chilling effect, I don't know what is.